The Saga of the Ynglings. Chapter 1. From the Hemskringla, History of the Kings of Norway by Snorri Sturluson. The earth's round, on which mankind lives, is much indented. Great seas cut into the land from the ocean. We know that a sea goes from the Norva Sound, the Strait of Gibraltar, all the way to Jerusalem land, or Palestine. From the sea, a long arm extends to the northwest, which is called the Black Sea. It separates the three parts of the world. The part to the eastward is called Asia, but that which lies to the west of it is called by some Europe, by others Enea. North of the Black Sea lies Svithjoth the Great, or the Cold. Some men considered Svithjoth the Great not less in size than Serkland the Great, which is North Africa, and some think it is equal in size to Blaland, Black Men's Land, or Africa. The northern part of Svithjoth is uncultivated on account of frost and cold, just as the southern part of Blaland is a desert because of the heat of the sun. In Svithjoth, there are many large provinces. There are also many tribes and many tongues. There are giants and dwarfs. There are black men and many kinds of strange tribes. Also, there are animals and dragons of marvelous size. Out of the north, from the mountains, which are beyond all inhabited districts, a river runs through Svithjoth, whose correct name is Tanais, the Don River. In olden times, it was called the Tana Fork or the Vana Fork. Its mouth is in the Black Sea. The land around the Vana Fork was then called Vanaholm, or the home of the Vanir. The river divides the three continents. East of it is Asia, west of it is Europe. The land east of the Tana Fork was called the land or home of the Aesir, and the capital of that country they called Asgarth. In the capital, the chieftain ruled, whose name was Othin. This was a great place for sacrifices. The rule prevailed there that 12 temple priests were highest in rank. They were to have charge of sacrifices and to judge between men. They are called Diar, or chiefs. All the people were to serve them and show them reverence. Othin was a great warrior and fared widely, conquering many countries. He was so victorious that he won the upper hand in every battle. As a result, his men believed that it was granted to him to be victorious in every battle. It was his habit that before sending his men to battle or on other errands, he would lay his hands on their heads and give them janak. Then they believed they would succeed. It was also noted that wherever his men were sore bestead on sea or on land, they would call on his name and they would get help from so doing. They put all their trust in him. Often he was away so long as to be gone for many years. Chapter 3 of Othin's brothers. Othin had two brothers. One was called V and the other called Vili. These his brothers governed the realm when he was gone. One time when Othin was gone to a great distance, he stayed away so long that the Aesir thought he would never return. Then his brothers began to divide his inheritance, but his wife Frigg they shared between them. However, a short while afterwards, Othin returned and took possession of his wife again. Chapter 4, the war between the Aesir and the Vanir. Othin made war on the Vanir, but they resisted stoutly and defended their land. Now the one, now the other was victorious, and both devastated the land of their opponents, doing each other damage. But when both wearied of that, they agreed on a peace meeting and concluded a peace, giving each other hostages. The Vanir gave their most outstanding men, North the wealthy and his son Frey, but the Aesir in their turn furnished one whose name was Owner. declaring him to be well fitted to be a chieftain. He was a large man and exceedingly handsome. Together with him the Aesir sent one called Mimer, a very wise man, and the Vanir in return sent the one who was the cleverest among them. His name was Kafsar. Now when Oner arrived in Vanaheim, he was at once made a chieftain. Mimer advised him in all things, but when Oner was present at meetings or assemblies without having Mimer at his side, and was asked for his opinion on a difficult matter, he would always answer in the same way, saying, "Let others decide." Then the Vanir suspected that Aesir had defrauded them in the exchange of hostages. Then they seized Mimer and beheaded him, and sent the head to the Aesir. Othin took it and embalmed it with herbs so that it would not rot, and spoke charms over it, giving it magic power so that it would answer him and tell him many occult things. Othin appointed North and Frey to be priests for the sacrificial offerings, and they were Diar, or gods, among the Aesir. Freyja was the daughter of North. She was priestess of the sacrifices. It was she who taught the Aesir magic, such as was practiced among the Vanir. While North lived with the Vanir, he and his sister as wife, because that was custom among them. Their children were Frey and Freyja, but among the Aesir it was forbidden to marry so near a king. Chapter 5. Gaffian plows Sealand out of Lake Malarian. A great mountain chain runs from the northwest to the southwest. It divides Swiftjaw the Great from the other realms. South of the mountains is not far to Turkey. There Othin had large possessions. At the time, the generals of the Romans moved about far and wide, subjugating all peoples, and many chieftains fled from their possessions because of these hostilities. And because Othin had the gift of prophecy and was skilled in magic, he knew that his offsprings would inhabit the northern parts of the world. Then he set his brothers Ve and Vili over Asgarth, but he himself and all Diar and many other people departed. First he journeyed west to Gartharke, Russia, and then south to Saxland, northwest Germany. He had many sons. He took possession of lands far and wide in Saxland, and set his sons to defend these lands. Okay, let me continue on. Othin died in his bed in Sweden, but when he felt death approaching, he had himself marked with the point of a spear, and he declared as his own all men who fell in battle. He said he was about to depart to the abode of the gods, and would there welcome his friends. So then the Swedes believed that he had gone to the old Asgarth, and would live there forever. Then the belief of Othin arose anew, and they called on him. Often the Swedes thought he revealed himself before great battles were fought, when he would give victory to some and invite others to come to his abode. And it continues on. Othin was burned after his death, and the burning on the pyre of his body took place with great splendor. After him, North of Nuaten took power among the Swedes and continued the sacrifices. Now this goes on and says, after North, Frey succeeded in power. He was called King of the Swedes and received tribute from them. And after Freyr lived and created the Ynglings dynasty, which is the kings of Norway, he died, and his priest kept his body in a mound and told the Swedish people he wasn't dead yet. But the Hemscreen says eventually they figured it out, and it says, when all Swedes knew that Frey was dead, but that good seasons and peace still prevailed, they believed this would be the case so long as Frey was in Sweden, and so they would not burn him and call him the god of the world and sacrifice to him ever after for good harvest and peace. And There's another passage in here I thought was interesting. It said, North married a woman who called Scathy. She would not have intercourse with him, and later married Othin. They had many sons. One of them was called Seming. About him, Ewing Skaldaspiller composed these verses, and then there's a poem. But I don't believe that North was the father of Frey and Freyja. I think it was Othin. And even the mythology attributes Othin as the father. So after Freyr died, his sister Freyja continued on, and it says when all the Swedes knew that Frey was dead, but that good seasons of peace still prevailed, they believed this would be the case as long as Frey was in the Sweden, and so they would not burn him and call him the god of the world, and sacrifice to him ever after for good harvests and peace. It also says in the Hemskringla that Frey erected a great temple at Uppsala and made his chief residence there, directing to it all tribute due to him, both lands and chattels. So I believe that this ancient god is Apollo, and he is buried in Gamla Uppsala. And as I read, Odin Zeus was cremated. I also believe that the sister Freyja is buried there. Now they attribute the mounds to Othin, Thor, and Freyr, the main mounds, but there are a lot of mounds, burial mounds in Gamla Uppsala in Sweden. It is also my theory that Thor is the equivalent of Heracles, and I don't believe he was buried there. I believe he ended up being buried in ancient Mesopotamia. As I've said, this bloodline traveled the world, and their bloodline became the kings and queens around the world. And a lot of that bloodline has been exterminated and killed off. You know, the French monarchy, the Irish monarchy, the Scottish monarchy, the Russian czars. Look what happened to Germany. And all of, in the Americas, Montezuma and Atapuerca, I believe it is, in the Inca. I'll double check that. It's Atahualpa. That was the emperor of the Incans, and he was killed off by the Spanish. But I think, much of this bloodline that became the royals has been killed off. And if you get into my research, you'll also know that Athena went over to Ireland. She was the ancient goddess Bridget, and she created that Tuatha De Danann bloodline that was taken over later by the pharaohs when Queen Scotia came in and merged with it. But most of that bloodline has been removed from power and exterminated. And what sits on the thrones today, who knows? It could be a Promethean bloodline. We don't know what it is. Okay, so that's just a little bit on Apollo-Freyr, and he has many equivalents. I believe I've got to go back and look, but I think it's Surya and the Hindu, and several other ones. But his story ends in the Nordic countries with the kings of Sweden and Norway that came to rule.